What is change management and how can you be more effective at it? I believe for you to be effective, you got to understand the people and apply a model that will help you be effective at it. We're going to review 2 possible models that you can apply to personal change and your business and organizational change. Hey, I'm Miles Street, and I help international business leaders who've been experiencing winning moments in the past, but right now you realize you need a new game plan. And I will help you develop that game plan so that you can dominate in your industry and in your life. You see, as leaders, we're going to always be dealing with some kind of change. It could be as simple as adding a new team member, or maybe you just want to tweak a process or something you're doing right now to improve your performance. Or maybe you just need to overhaul the whole damn thing. Yes, overhaul the whole organization or your company or your business. And it's very large and complex. And you have to apply a model or methodology to it. But for it ever to be effective, you have to win over the hearts and minds of the people, according to John Cotter. And I truly believe that. So simply, what is change? Change is to alter or make it different. It's to do it different than it was before. Could be maybe you're adding something. Could be taking something away. Could be just tweaking something a little bit. Small thing, simple thing. If you do this with certain people, they're not going to like it. They're going to struggle with it. They're not going to like to hear about it. Then maybe you realize, hey, the organization ain't where it should be. It needs to be totally overhauled. And that's what you got to do. You got to overhaul the whole thing and make major change along the way. And if you're going to do that, you got to be able to manage that. So what is change management? It's a whole process, a whole philosophy. There's tons of models that you can use towards that. We're going to look at 2 specific models, but there are plenty out there that you can go study about, learn, read about, and apply. If you found this of value, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. First, you need to think about who is this change going to impact? Is it going to be affecting one group, one person? Maybe it's going to affect the whole organization. Maybe one specific team within the organization. I don't know, but think about who that is. I like what John Cotter says. You have to win over the hearts and minds of the people. So think about that. It starts here. It starts with the emotions. One of the things he talks about as well is you got to be thinking about, okay, who is this going to impact? And count out all those people. Yes. Think about the numbers of people it's going to impact. Maybe it's just you and you're in your business and you're running it solo and it's only you. Okay, that's quite simple. Maybe yours is more complex than that. I don't know, 10, maybe it's 50, maybe it's 1,000 people. I don't know. But think about, who is it going to impact? Now, do they have a seat at the table? That's right, a seat at the table. Not every individual if you have a large, complex organization, but at least the leaders within those groups. And hopefully they're good communicators. And hopefully they take that message back to those people that it's going to impact. But at the end of the day, make sure you have the right people at the table when you begin to cast this vision of change. Now that you've thought about those people and you made sure that they have a seat at the table, or at least a good representative that's a good communicator, and hopefully someone they trust and like maybe. If they have that, there's some things you need to be prepared for. And that is some of the stages that every individual goes through when they face change. And that first stage is denial, shock and denial. They can't believe this is happening. They might have not thought about it, but hey, here it is. And when that happens, you need to be prepared with your best communication plan that you can come up with. Think about your different avenues of communication, how you're going to share that vision, how you're going to cast that vision, who's going to share it with who, how's it going to get out, how you're going to disseminate it. But you've got to have that communication plan in place, and hopefully you've thought through it, and hopefully you deliver it in a way that speaks to, yes, the heart of the people. Because if you speak to the heart of the people and you get their buy-in on the front end, that change process is going to be a little bit easier. It's not going to be completely easy, but it's going to be a little bit easier. But you got to buy into their hearts, because people make decisions based on emotion, not logic, on their emotions. So make sure you deliver that vision, that communication with emotion, with thinking about the people and thinking about where their heart is at and how you can get them to buy into that. After that, you're going to face the anger and disruption phase. Yes, you're going to have some unhappy people. You're going to have some fearful people. You're going to have some confused people. You might lose a few people, and that might be okay. You don't want to lose your best people, but you might have a few bad people that if they just left, it would be a great day. And that's okay. But for you to handle this phase and make it through the curve, you need to have planning and preparation in place. Yes, you should have sat down and thought and planned through this and strategized and come up with what are you going to do with those obstacles you're going to face? What are you going to do about those fears? What are you going to do about those angry people? What are you going to do about those people that are losing hope? What are you going to do if things aren't going as planned? What are you going to do if it gets off course? Have a plan in place. Once you do that, you're going to hit phase 3. Phase 3 is your acceptance and exploration phase. Yeah, this is the possible turning point, and hopefully things are going to turn around and start looking up and looking better for you and for your organization. And when you get in this phase, it takes time and training. That's right. Time, that precious commodity that maybe you don't really have much of, but you got to give time for people to change. And you got to make sure you provide adequate training for them to make that change. So how is this change going to impact them? What kind of training do you need to put in place when you do that training? Or to get enough time to practice it, implement it, learn from it, apply it? When they do it right, are they being acknowledged, rewarded for that? Every little thing that they do right towards that change, they may need or should receive some kind of acknowledgement. Maybe it's just a simple pat on the back or a that a boy. Maybe it needs to be something in front of the whole team, organization. I don't know what it is or what maybe that person prefers. But if you do those things, that turning point, they're going to come out of it quicker. And you celebrate those small wins. In the final phase, you have commitment. You've accomplished your goal. You've reached your objective because you've given them time. You've provided them with that training. You've reached your goal and objective for this change. When you do that, you definitely need to celebrate those big wins. How did you win? How are you going to celebrate it? What are the benefits? And keep pointing it out. And when you get there, guess what? It's really not the end. You got to keep it there. You got to hold people accountable to it. You got to keep letting them know when you're winning, when they're celebrating, when you're seeing the benefits of it. Because guess what? It's not going to be too long. You're going to have to go through this cycle again. Because if you've implemented any change and been involved in change, you realize it really never stops. It's a continual cycle, and you're going to have to get ready for it again. One of the models I like to use when dealing with change and instructing others on how to manage change is Kotter's 8-step change model. And I find this very effective when you're dealing with bigger change management projects or big organizational change. And I think you can implement this real easily for yourself. So the first, it starts with creating a sense of urgency. The reality is you're at a point where you realize, hey, change is about to happen, and you know it needs to happen for yourself, for your organization, and you got to create that sense of urgency. This is where you begin on the front end of it, communicating it to your team, getting some buy-in, especially from your biggest stakeholders, your most valuable people, as you begin this process. After you do that, that's where you move to the guided coalition. That is where you get your smaller internal stakeholder team, people that are really going to be a vital part of this change process for yourself. And they also are going to help you with that vision, help you deal with certain obstacles you're going to face along the way as well. And they're going to be your strategic partners through as you implement and follow this process. From there, with that group, you got to create that vision for change. And hopefully you can create it with keeping in mind the people that are going to be instrumental in bringing about this change, especially if it's a larger organizational change. Once you have created that vision, then you need to be able to communicate it, and you need to think about what are your methods of communication. Are you going to launch it with a big announcement, big gathering, big meeting, or are you going to use video, or are you going to use other methods? How are you going to go about casting and communicating that vision? And when you do that, make sure you plan to do that where you're doing it with emotion, so you're getting the buy-in of the people, and the person that's leading this is a person that can speak to the hearts of the people. From there, begin to remove the obstacles, and as they begin to rise up, figure out how you're going to remove them. Create a team around that. Hopefully you've created a team, especially either in the vision process or in the communication phase, that you have a team of people who have already bought in. And these people are going to be instrumental in helping getting others on board, but they're also going to be instrumental in helping you remove the various obstacles that get in the way. And that means too, you as stakeholders, others involved, make sure you're not the obstacle that's getting in the way of this. From there, begin to create short-term wins. If you've done the training, if you've given them time, and you've done an excellent job of communicating it, as you see people doing the right things, you see people implementing the specific changes, you need to celebrate those short-term wins. You need to acknowledge those people and do that in that phase. After you've done that, you need to consolidate on your improvements. So it's just like anything else. You're going to launch this program, and your goal is to start making progress. And as you make progress, you're going to perfect it as you go. So where do the improvements need to be made? What are some roadblocks that continue to raise their ugly head? Where are you seeing people reverting back to the old way of doing things? Start addressing those things as well. And then just continue to consolidate those improvements along the way. And finally, create the changes. And that last phase is making sure the change sticks. And you got to audit it. You got to follow up with people. You got to make sure the people that's been involved in that team that's helped you implement that change, that they're also out there making sure it sticks, and continue encouraging people. Continue celebrating those small wins, but also celebrate the big wins. You need to have that big celebration for yourself, for the team, for the organization, because you've accomplished something that's quite large. And the reality is, a lot of change is not successful. And the best way for you to make it successful is you've thought through the process and you've implemented it, but you followed through and taken action on it. And at the same time, you've gotten your people to follow up with it. And if you can continue that follow-up and accountability, it will stick. And then guess what? You have to get ready for the next change. In my early career days, I was working for a U.S.-based NGO, probably around 1,000 members at that time. This was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it was growing quite rapidly, and it began to expand into a international, multinational NGO with locations from spread out all over the world: Australia, Singapore, Germany, Ghana, Brazil. There's some others, but I'm not going to name them all there. And people from those locations were joining local teams located throughout the world. And the team that I was on was in Thailand as all this was happening. And as it was happening, yes, there was that sense of urgency. The biggest thing, a lot of communication was very strategic in that process. And that was the day when it was email. Okay, there was no cell phones were just starting to be used, and text messaging, and it was just a phone call. Text messaging wasn't, yeah. The location I was living in, that's all I had was a cell phone, and that's how I did my email, through my cell phone. And I thought that was cool, the Nokia days. So that tells you how long ago that was. But they created that urgency. Yes, did they have a guiding coalition, not only US based, but as they begin to incorporate the international locations or offices, whatever you want to call them, they had specific leaders from there as well, that they created that guiding coalition for this whole process. There was a definite vision cast for it. And they communicated that vision really well, even down to the team level. And this is, I think, what's so strategic about that all the stakeholders had bought in. And because the biggest impact was going to be at the team level, because those home offices, once those people left their country, they became our responsibility. And it could be a good or bad thing, okay? And that's where it was so key. And one of the key things about it all was as they brought about that organizational change, they created a common language around it. Yes, as an international organization, using English, creating a common language and defining some of the terms very specifically about the culture of that organization, because it was the mindset of that organization as well that culture was king, and it beat strategy every day. Believe me, on the ground, strategy was very important. Yes, we talked about a lot about strategy, but for the organization, culture was king, and they defined that. And I thought that was the best thing that they could have done, especially when you're working multinational, internationally, common languages, English. Yes, you take me, Southern, home country boy, American, working with an Aussie or a German or a Singaporean, and yes, they know English, studied English, and some of the times miscommunication happens easily, but developing that common language was key. Sign up for your complimentary coaching call, and I'll help you identify 3 fast fix solutions to overcome the obstacles you're facing in your change management process. So, second model I like to use when dealing with change, and I find this very beneficial, especially when you're dealing with personal change or change on a smaller level, maybe within your team, or maybe you're just a small organization and you don't have a large group of people that you got to mobilize for your change. So, but the ADKAR model is really easy and simple to follow. First, you got to start with awareness, and that is, you got to get the community. There again, we're talking again about that communication plan and having it out there and interacting with the people and finding out from them what is it specifically that some of their concerns, and how can you become aware of those, making them aware of the change and when it's coming and what the plan is, how is it going to benefit them, and how are you going to implement it, and do that on the front end. The more you do that on the front end, the easier you're going to make it for yourself, and you just create that awareness ahead of time. Next, you got to create that desire for them to see the benefits of the results that you're promising from this change. And that comes for them, but it also comes from you as well. What is that desire? Why do you desire to make this change for yourself? And one of the things you started looking at is, what are the forces for it, and what are the forces against it? Do a force field analysis and begin to evaluate that, even for yourself. All right, you're simple. You're wanting to make a change. Let's just say you want to make a change in your personal life somewhere, with your time that you're spending with your spouse or your relationship or something of that nature. And you got to start looking at the forces for it and the forces against it, start evaluating some of those. Maybe it's time, maybe it's something's happened in the relationship, I don't know, but then evaluate that and then determine how can you make the forces for it higher than the forces against it, and create that desire and focus on that desire. Next is just creating that knowledge, right? And here is where knowledge and ability, there again, it comes back down to what we talked about before as that time and training, and making sure people have the knowledge that they need, understand the purpose behind the change and how it's going to benefit them, what are some of the results, but even for yourself. Develop that knowledge for yourself, all right? And as you develop that knowledge, what new skills and abilities do you need to have to make this change successful? So whether you do it on a personal level, maybe you do it on a business level, think about that skill level as well. And is that skill level a strength or a weakness? How much time do you need to spend on it? And focus on developing that strength and those weaknesses, and developing that ability for this change to be effective for yourself. Once you've done that, the final part is just reinforcement. And that reinforcement there again comes back to making sure you're being accountable. Hey, like that. Accountable for the results. That's what accountability is about. Giving a good answer for the results. And that's just following up with it, checking on it. Have you put measures in place? Are you making those measurements visible for people to see? If you're not meeting those measurements, what are you doing about it? If you are, how are you celebrating it? And then if you ever see it going backwards or going back to the old way it was, you got to go back to that knowledge and ability. Go look at, okay, why are we going back to the way we used to do things, and how can we change that? What is it, a skill issue? Is it a people issue? What is it? And implement that change and get it back to the state that you want to have it at. The best example I have for using the ADKAR model on a personal level is a couple of years ago. I realized I was way out of shape. I was 20 pounds overweight. I'd been basically, I was a single parent. I'd been working on my master's degree, and I was spending all my time studying and eating and not really exercising, and I was way out of shape, and I didn't want to be that way any longer. So there was a lot of awareness and desire at that point. And with that awareness and desire, I've exercised all my life, lifted weights all my life, played sports growing up. Managing my weight has always been a struggle, and I've gone through different phases throughout my life where I've gain weight, lose weight, gain weight, lose weight, and this time I tried something different. Yes, I went out and I hired a coach, a personal fitness trainer, and began to implement the training. There was knowledge provided with that. It was all on Facebook at the time, and learned about stuff like intermittent fasting, changed it the way I did my workouts, and implemented all those things, that knowledge base, and the ability as well. Some of it was, especially with the intermittent fasting, learning some of the secrets behind that and how that was beneficial to me. And yes, I was able to, I kept it up for 2 years. I'd hate to say I've fallen off track. I need to get back to it. So now I'm trying to reinforce it again. And that is using that knowledge and ability that I previously had, and reinforcing it and implementing some of the things that will help me get there that I learned from the last time. Some of those things goes back to the intermittent fasting, watching my meal times. And the key right now, I can tell you, is staying away from the alcohol, drinking the beer, and staying away from the snacks late at night. And I can tell by getting away from those things that made a big impact. And so, there again is knowledge and ability. I've got to implement it. Hey, thanks for joining me. I'm Miles Street. I hope you've enjoyed this. Hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Also, check out the video above on the Next Level Virtual Leadership. I think it'll help you out with all the changes going on.